This is a concept I talk about so frequently, but I can't believe I didn't make a standalone video just about this topic. And this topic is called the head and the heart. Okay, so we oftentimes think that we think things. But, just because we think things, it doesn't necessarily come into reality. So, I I'm thinking about eating some nacho chips. I'm thinking really hard. But as you can see, it's not really indicative of what I'm actually doing with my life, right? So, what am I actually doing? I'm recording a YouTube video about the head and the heart. So, the English word, right, for thinking has a very, this kind of a cognitive meaning associated with it. But in East Asian languages, and basically the core languages that Buddhism uses, there's a distinction between the cognitive functions. And the most important distinction that we're making for the sake of this video is the distinction between the head and the heart. And the English word for, the whole, everything that's invisible, right? So the things that I'm thinking about, the things that I'm feeling, right? The English word for this kind of unconscious layer, it means we like to call it the mind, right? So the mind is this vague umbrella term for everything, but I need you to imagine a different language, okay? So, because languages form constructs, so there's a lot of words in Korean that don't exist in English, there's a lot of words in English that don't exist in Korean, right? So, because of the language that you use, how constructs form in your mind and how you think about things, it's very largely dependent on language. So with that context, in English, we like to think of this mind as this one thing that encompasses a lot of things. But in Korean, which is, the primary language that I study Buddhism with, there's a difference between the thought-based cognitive functions, and this is what I call thinking, right? And the feelings that really drive our behavior, we in Korean words, you think the heart feels something, but the heart kind of has an intent of its own. So the heart thinks things, which is kind of strange to think about it in English. But when we are talking about desire, it's so important to distinguish between the two. So now I'll give you some examples of why this actually matters. Today on Reddit, somebody messaged me about, hey, I'm going through this really tough time right now, can you help me? So I was like, what's up? And they were talking about having a really big ego, right? And but having a big ego is, it's just okay. So it's a personality thing, right? You think highly of yourself. But this person was saying that they were suffering because of this really big ego, and it makes them feel really bad because they find themselves constantly comparing with other people, right? And the ego has an inflated idea of itself, so it thinks it should be better than whatever thing another person is doing. But then in reality, it's likely not going to be like that, right? So they suffer because of it. Okay, so all you have to do is just drop that thought, right? Easily said than done, but all you have to do is just recognize that and recognize and just think that, hey, there's nothing that special about me, and other people who are good at things have the combination of some genetic blessing plus a lot of applied effort. And you know what? If I can apply total applied effort to that amount to reach that, I can also be the same thing, right? So I didn't know how to play the guitar when I was born, and I got jealous of the people who played guitar. So I practiced, and then I learned how to play guitar, and now I can play guitar, right? But I can't play as well as like Jeff Beck, R.I.P. But Jeff Beck played for a lot longer than me, right? So it makes sense that I can't play like Jeff Beck, and so on. But the thought of the ego, but I should be better than everyone else. It keeps coming back, right? So that's because while you think you're gonna drop that ego-based thought, in here, it still believes it. It still believes I'm better than everyone else. So, regardless of what your thought thinks, right? What your head thinks, what's actually driving a lot of your behavior sits in here, in your heart. Some more examples to help you understand. I wake up at 5 every day to do my Buddhist prayers. And you know what? I've been doing it for a year, but I still don't want to do it, right? So, in the morning, I wake up, I look at the alarm and it's 5 o'clock, and I'm like, oh man, I should get up. Oh, I really need to get up. Oh man, I really want to get up. Okay, so if I'm doing this, in my head I'm thinking I want to get up, right? But, do I really want to get up? If I really wanted to get up, I would just get up. The whole premise of the thoughts of I don't want to get up is that I am still in bed. So, my head can think all at once, I need to wake up, I have to get up, I want to get up. But, as long as this doesn't move, I don't get up. That is another way of identifying what's actually driving my behavior, right? So I can think, oh man, I really don't want to get up. But then if I'm already up and moving to my room to start the prayer, then what do I actually want? My body, my head may want to go back to bed, but my body, what I am actually doing with my body, it tells me what I want to actually be doing is praying, right? So this is the ultimate distinction. 2 more examples for you. Number 1 is when you make up your mind, right? We all have those kind of like bursts where we're just kind of like really fed up with the excuses that we make, and at 2 a.m. we're done scrolling, and then you see some motivational content and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And it's that 2 a.m. kind of a mood, and then you make up your mind, right? Yeah, I'm really gonna do it. And then many people wake up and they're like, oh fuck, I can't do it. But when it sticks, right, you have that moment where you're like, I really can't live like this anymore. Something has to change. That's when the heart goes from living like this is fine to, you know what, I don't think this is fine. And at that moment, you can think a lot of things. Your body can be tired, and you may not want to be doing things, but guess what, you're gonna be moving, because why? Your heart shifted already, right? So this is what happens in a lot of movies. So in movies, in storytelling, there's a first death and then the second death, right? So the first death usually leads to a character change in the protagonist, like a change in heart. And that's basically, so if you think about any movie like Harry Potter or like Star Wars, after the first kind of like significant character death, right, like ego death, when their heart actually changes, when they actually feel the need to change, that's what I'm talking about when I say the heart actually decided to change. So the last example I have is this is a more negative kind of a one, but it's when you give up. Right? It's talking about the 5 stages of grief. It's when you come to acceptance, and you tried your best, and then you had this like lingering mind that keeps you going back to this thing that you really wanted to do, and then you keep trying and trying, but then after a certain point, you kind of realize that this is a lost cause, and then you're able to kind of like, and you know what? There's a perfectly good word for this: closure. So what's the difference between like not having closure and having closure? You don't linger anymore, right? Because your head may move on, but then if your heart didn't move on, then you keep like you keep checking up on the things that you should be moving on from, and then so on. But then when you get closure, you're just done, right? You moved on. So now that we are able to kind of tell the difference between the head and the heart, you can now see that what drives action is the heart. So if your life is not really going the way you want it to, you have an intended way that you want to live, but then you're not really getting the results that you're desiring, it's likely because your head thinks it wants those things. Your head thinks it wants to move a certain direction, but this doesn't. This wants to stay here for a lot of different reasons. It may feel comfortable here. It may not really be seeing the point of doing something. It may be feeling like it's too hard. It may be feeling like there's something to lose by moving on, right? So when you know this, when you take an honest assessment of your life and see what you are actually doing in your day-to-day, you can see what your heart is desiring and not your head. And when the head and the heart don't want the same thing, that's when life becomes stressful, right? I want to wake up at 5 a.m. to pray every day, right? So when I think, I actually want to get up, then no problem. But if I don't want to get up, but I'm thinking, but I really want to get up, that's when stress happens, right? When I want to get up here, but I keep thinking, but man, I really want to go back to bed. Again, I'm just inviting suffering onto myself, right? So that heart alignment with your head is very important in moving your life to the direction of your choice, because those directions are calculated by your head. But in order for you to actually move to that direction, your heart has to be convinced, and then you go, right? Studying a foreign language always sounds good, but why do you stop? Because you don't want to here, right? So that's why the biggest impetus for any kind of change is a deep desire and an interest. And what I'm saying is that is basically equivalent to the heart desiring something, different from the head desiring something. So if we know that changing the heart is so important, then how do we change the heart? That's the natural next question, right? So how do we change the heart? Heart can change in two ways, broadly. Number one, it can change abruptly because of some deep unconscious impact. And this is what happens a lot in movies, right? You have a significant event that happens and then it completely alters the course of your life. And so that not only changes the way you think, but it also changes how your heart feels with things, right? So for example, like I don't know that many movies these days, so I can't really draw an example. Oh, you know what? Lion King. Everyone knows the Lion King. Okay, so Simba flees from the Pride Lands and then has a Hakuna Matata kind of a life, but there's always something, this kind of feeling that's missing. There's this void in his heart, but he doesn't want to do anything about it, So in his head, Simba is doing Hakuna Matata, but in his heart, he's lingering, right? But what happens? Nala suddenly comes into the picture, and she's like, "Oh my God, Pride Land fucking sucks now." And Simba is now thinking about this a little bit deeper. What does everything mean? And then Simba has a spiritual connection with his father, Mufasa, right? And then Mufasa shows up and says, "Simba, remember, you are the king. You're a king, Simba." And after that experience, Simba is determined, right? His mind is changed. And actually, after the encounter with Rafiki comes and such a great scene, reminds Simba of his, destiny, right? And at that moment, Simba, there's no lingering anymore. He's set. And that is the kind of a deep unconscious shift that happens in one step. But the thing is, because it's unconscious, we don't have direct access to it. So if you have a hypnotist that you know, or if some stars align in your life and you get one of those life-altering events happen in your life, then good, this can happen to you. But, again, it's not really reliable. It's not really under complete control. Therefore, the alternative way is the more ongoing kind of a way. And that is my Buddhist practice. I wanted to change my life. And I noticed that, my heart needed to change. And I looked at other ways of changing the heart, but none of them were reliable. I couldn't guarantee the change of heart. And you know what? I'm a life coach. So I help people change their hearts. But if I can't change my heart using this practice, and I tell other people to do it, then it would be hypocrisy. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm gonna try it. See if I change. And then I'm happy to say my life has changed significantly. So what's the mechanic behind it? It is the voluntary, humanly possible challenge. And I talked about that in a lot of other videos, but in case I don't have a specific topical video about it, I will make that in the future. But just to summarize this video, what you think may only be scratching the surface of your entire mindscape. Mind. The English word mind encompasses a lot of different aspects of the invisible realm inside of your body. But the distinction that we want to make for the sake of this video is the distinction between the head and the heart. Your head can think whatever it wants, but what actually drives your behavior with what you do in your life is the heart. To change the heart, you either have a deep unconscious shift, or you have a sustained practice that is composed of a voluntary, humanly possible challenge. And with that, you start changing your heart, and you start becoming the master and the owner of your own free life.